welcome to the White House for this glorious occasion. I want to start by apologizing to all of the recipients and the family members who had their schedules rearranged because we had to move this ceremony from yesterday, when we had the East Room filled with the representatives of the various nations who were there to witness the signing of the agreement between Israel and the Palestinians. And we are very sorry we were unable to accommodate this ceremony on the same day. And I appreciate greatly your patience and willingness to reschedule to be here with us, because this is one of our favorite events. We look forward to it, we are excited by it, and delighted to have so many of you with us. I know there are a large number of members of Congress with us, and I know that they very well may have to leave midway through the ceremony because of activities in the Congress. And I wanted, on their behalf, to explain that they were not walking out on anyone, but would be forced, perhaps by circumstance, not to stay for the entire ceremony. So we are so pleased to see you here, and so grateful that we would have this opportunity to honor these great Americans. So I would like now to introduce the President.
Good morning and welcome to all of you, especially to the honorees, their family members, their friends, the distinguished members of Congress. The Presidential Medal of Freedom is the highest honor given to civilians in the United States. It has a special history established 50 years ago by President Truman to honor noble service in time of war. In 1963, President Kennedy expanded its purpose, making it an honor for distinguished civilian service in peacetime. The 12 Americans we honor today embody the best qualities in our national character. All have committed themselves, both publicly and privately, to expanding the circle of freedom and the opportunities the responsible exercise of freedom brings, at home and around the world. In this time of change, where people's living patterns and working patterns are undergoing such dramatic transformation, it is necessary and fashionable to focus on new ideas and new visions of the future. We are here today to celebrate people who have always been for change and who have changed America for the better, but who have done it based on the enduring values that make this country great. The belief that we have to give all of our citizens the chance to live up to the fullest of their God-given capacities. The conviction that we have to do everything we can to strengthen our families and our communities. The certainty that when the chips are down, we have to do what is good and right, even if it is unpopular in the short run. The understanding that we have the obligation to honor those who came before us by passing better lives and brighter opportunities on to those who come after. This medal commemorates the remarkable service and indelible spirit of individual Americans, but it also serves as a beacon to all Americans, and especially to our children. For our children, especially now when so many of their lives have been darkened by violence, and irresponsible or absent role models, the robbers of innocence, of poverty and drug abuse and gang life, the excesses of our modern commercial media culture and other forces that are undermining the fabric of good lives. All of these things require more and more people to live by the values and measure up to the example of the winners of the Presidential Medal of Freedom. They represent in so many ways the true face of American heroism today. Let me begin now by introducing each of them in turn. As a young mother 27 years ago, Peggy Charon took a good look at her children's frequent companion, television. and she did not like what she saw. But unlike others who simply bemoan the problem, she actually did something about it. She took a stand against entrenched and powerful institutions in government and in business, and she made them listen. She started action for children's television. As a result, she uplifted the quality of what comes into our homes and inspired a whole generation of citizen activists. In 1990, the campaign that began in front of Peggy Charon's television set reached Capitol Hill when Congress passed the Children's Television Act. And for the first time, the television industry was challenged to fulfill its responsibility to educate our children, not just to entertain them. Peggy Charon, mother and now grandmother, leader and reformer in the best American tradition, has put all of our children's first, and we thank her for it. We're going to do the award later. Now, I'm going to change the order here a minute, just a little, and go to Joan Gance Cooney. While Peggy Charon forced television to change its ways from the outside, Joan Gance Cooney did the same thing from the inside. In 1968, she launched the Children's Television Workshop, and a whole new landscape of joyful education opened up before our children's eyes. Out of this effort came Sesame Street, The Electric Company, 321 Contact, and other programs that enlightened not only our youngsters, but older people as well. With a host of lovable characters like the Cookie Monster and Big Bird, who became as familiar to me at one point in our family life as the people I grew up with. These shows have helped teach a generation of children to count and to read and to think. They also teach us more about how we should live together. We all know that Grover and Kermit reinforce rather than undermine the values we work so hard to teach our children, showing kids every day what it means to share, to respect differences, and to recognize that it's not easy being green. Joan Gance Cooney has proven in living color that the powerful medium of television can be a tool to build reason, not reaction, for growth, not stifling, to help build young lives up rather than tear them down. We all know that TV is here to stay. Most of us, frankly, love it, even when we curse it. But we also know that there are clear damaging effects to excessive exposure to destructive patterns of television. As the Vice President and Mrs. Gore have pointed out on so many occasions, and as their recent family conference on media and the family demonstrated, the numbing effects of violence are the numbing inability to concentrate that comes from overexposure to mindless, repetitive programming, are things that we have to fight against. Peggy Charon sounded the alarm. Joan Gance Cooney developed an alternative. And even today, as we grapple with this challenge, how to get the best and repress the worst, we know that we would be nowhere near where we are were it not for these two remarkable American heroes. We thank them. Thank you so much. Thank you. William T. Coleman Jr.'s first public act to advance equal opportunity came early in his life. He tried out for his high school swim team, and in response, the school disbanded the team. For 4 decades, in the courtroom, the boardroom, the halls of power, Bill Coleman has put his brilliant legal intellect in service to our country. He was the first African American accepted on the Harvard Law Review, the first to serve as a clerk on the United States Supreme Court, the first to serve in the President's Cabinet, the second to serve in the President's Cabinet, and the first to reach the pinnacle of the corporate bar. As Secretary of Transportation to President Ford, he helped to open the doors of opportunity to thousands of black entrepreneurs. As a corporate director, he broke the color barrier in the nation's executive suites. Today, as chairman of the board of the NAACP Legal Defense and Education Fund, he continues the fight. I have known Bill Coleman for a long time. I had the honor and pleasure of being his son's roommate for a year in law school. I think it is fair to say that the first time we saw each other, he never dreamed that I would be here and he would be there. But I can honestly say, if you are looking for an example of constancy, consistency, disciplined devotion to the things that make this country a great place, you have no further to look than William Coleman, Jr. Thank you. 50 years ago, John Hope Franklin was on a train in North Carolina, jammed into a compartment reserved for baggage and for African Americans. When he asked the conductor if he and his fellow passengers could move to a near-empty car occupied by just 5 white men, he was told it couldn't be done. For the men, the conductor said, were German prisoners of war. John Hope Franklin and those with him were prisoners of something else, American racism. John Hope Franklin has both lived and chronicled the history of race in America. He is the author of many books, including the classic From Slavery to Freedom, A History of African Americans. He provided Thurgood Marshall with critical historical research for the landmark case of Brown v. Board of Education. He has taught throughout America and around the world, and he has influenced countless students of the American scene with his profound scholarship. I look history straight in the eye and call it like it is, John Hope Franklin has said. This has meant telling the untold stories of Northern racism and of slaves successfully striking for better conditions under the sinful confines of slavery. It has meant blazing a trail through the academy, but never confusing his role as an advocate with his role as a scholar. It has meant holding to the conviction that integration is a national necessity if we are to truly live by the values enshrined in the Constitution. John Hope Franklin, the son of the South, has always been a moral compass for America, always pointing us in the direction of truth. I think I can speak for Hillary and for the Vice President and Mrs. Gore in saying that one of the most memorable moments of our campaign in 1992 was having John Hope Franklin take a ride with us on our campaign bus, and he sat in the front. John Hope Franklin. In 1944, at the age of 16, Leon Higginbotham arrived at his Midwestern college only to be pushed back by the icy hand of racism. There, he and 12 other African American students were housed in an unheated attic. Fed up with sub-zero nights, Leon Higginbotham went to the university president to protest. Higginbotham, the president, said, "The law doesn't require us to let colored students in the dorm, and you either accept things as they are or leave the university." So Leon Higginbotham set out to change the law. He went to Yale Law School, and after he was rejected by every major Philadelphia law firm because of his race, he turned to public service, working as a community lawyer and a state and federal official. When Leon Higginbotham was named to the federal bench at the age of 36 by President Kennedy, he was the youngest federal judge to be appointed in 3 decades. He served with distinction and eventually became judge of the Third Circuit Court of Appeals. He also found the time to write and speak with idealism and rigor on the great dilemmas of race and justice. His retirement has been spent remarkably. helping to draft the Constitution for a democratic South Africa, and teaching a fresh generation of students at Harvard. We honor Judge Higginbotham, whose life, as much as his scholarship, has set an example of commitment, enlargement, and service to new minds at home, and now, thank God, to a newly free South Africa an ocean away. Thank you, Leon Higginbotham. Judge Frank Johnson could not be here today, and so had to send the young gentleman to my left to receive his award for him. He was advised by his doctor not to travel. I admire that doctor. I imagine that he is the first person who ever got Frank Johnson to do something he did not want to do. For his steadfastness, his constitutional vision, his courage to uphold the value of equal opportunity, even at the expense of his own personal safety. For these things, we honor Frank Johnson with the Presidential Medal of Freedom. During 40 years on the bench, Judge Johnson made it his mission to see to it that justice was done within the framework of law. In the face of unremitting social and political pressure to uphold the traditions of oppression and neglect in his native South, never once did he yield. His landmark decisions in the areas of desegregation, voting rights, and civil liberties transformed our understanding of the Constitution. He fought for the right of Rosa Parks to sit where she wanted on the bus, and battled for the right of Martin Luther King and others to march from Selma to Montgomery. Armed with the gavel and the Constitution, Frank Johnson changed the face of the South. He challenged America to move closer to the ideals upon which it is founded, and forever will be an inspiration to all who admire courage and value freedom. We wish he were here with us today, but his spirit is in this place, and we thank him. For a good long while now, Dr. C. Everett Koop, as Surgeon General of the United States and afterward as America's most well-known private doctor, has told the nation the truth as he sees it, whether we want to hear it or not. In so doing, he has saved countless lives and left an enduring legacy of the doctor as a healer in the broadest and deepest sense of the word. Dr. Koop's life has been defined by doing the right thing. He chose children's medicine for the simple reason that his colleagues were ignoring it. He refused to let political considerations leave Americans vulnerable to the epidemics of AIDS and teen pregnancy. He fought for sex education, knowing that if he were to be true to the value of protecting our children, we could not let them live in perilous ignorance. He told America that tobacco is addictive, that it kills, and that we have to get cigarettes out of our children's hands. He helped us to come to grips with the painful shortcomings in America's healthcare delivery system and what it means for children that over 40 million of our people have no health insurance. And we value his support for the action now being taken to try to protect children's lives from the epidemic of smoking, which embraces 3,000 of them a day and will shorten 1,000 of their lives every day. Dr. Koop's record is a priceless reminder that disease is immune to ideology and that viruses do not play politics. Over the course of his career, I have seen him attacked from both the left and the right for his strong convictions. But all of us who have watched him, not only in public, but as Hillary and I have had the chance to do in private, know that in the very best sense, he stands for life in America and for the potential of all of our children. And for that, the United States should be eternally grateful to C. Everett Koop. "25 years ago this year, Americans came together for the very first Earth Day. They came together to make it clear that dirty air, poisoned water, spoiled land were simply unacceptable. They came together to say that preserving our natural heritage for our children is a national value. And they came together, more than anything else, because of one American, Gaylord Nelson. His career as Wisconsin's governor, United States Senator, and now as counselor of the Wilderness Society has been marked by integrity, civility, and vision. His legacy is inscribed in legislation, including the National Environmental Education Act and the 1964 Wilderness Act. As the father of Earth Day, he is the grandfather of all that grew out of that event: the Environmental Protection Act, the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, the Safe Drinking Water Act. He also set a standard for people in public service to care about the environment and to try to do something about it. And I think that the Vice President would want me to say that young people like Al Gore back in 1970 realized, because of Gaylord Nelson, that if they got into public service, they could do something to preserve our environment for future generations. In the 1970s, when a river was so polluted it actually caught on fire, Gaylord Nelson spoke up. He insisted that Americans deserve the safety that comes from knowing the world we live in will not make us sick. He warned that our leaders should never let partisan politics divert us from responsibility to our shared environment. He inspired us to remember that the stewardship of our natural resources is the stewardship of the American dream. He is the worthy heir of the tradition of Theodore Roosevelt, and the Vice President's work and that of all other environmentalists today is the worthy heir of Gaylord Nelson. Today, as much as at any time in modern American history, we need to remember what we share on this precious planet and in this beloved country. And I hope that Gaylord Nelson's shining example will illuminate all the debates in this city for years to come. Walter Reuther was an American visionary so far ahead of his times that although he died a quarter of a century ago, our nation has yet to catch up to his dreams. A tool and die maker by trade, Walter Reuther built a great union that lifted industrial workers into the middle class. But he always understood that the UAW stood for something greater and nobler than a few more dollars in the paycheck. So he fought for causes on the edge of America's horizon, from racial justice to small cars that would conserve fuel and compete successfully both here and abroad. He wanted America to create an economy strong and supple enough to convert from peacetime production to defense work and back again without costing workers and their families their livelihoods. As the journalist Murray Kempton said later, Walter Reuther was one man who could reminisce about the future. The union he led and the future he built stand as a memorial to what is bravest and best in the American spirit. Would that we had more people like him today. We are honored that his daughters are here and that his award will be received by his young grandson, Walter Reuther. Our homes, our cities, our neighborhoods, our communities, all these represent who we are. With the helping hand of James Rouse, many of these places have come to reflect our best values. In the 1960s, James Rouse saw a problem. Poorly planned suburban neighborhoods did more than take away from the landscape. They had a corrosive effect on our sense of community. So he did something about it. He conceived and built Columbia, Maryland. By updating the colonial village for modern times, he gave a generation of architects and designers a blueprint for reviving community all across our nation. A decade later, James Rouse turned to another monumental task, healing the torn-out heart of America's cities. He met the challenge head-on. With Boston's Faneuil Hall, Baltimore's Harbor Place, and other developments, he put the town square squarely back into America's urban life. He proved that we could reclaim and recreate our urban frontiers. Advisor to presidents, foe of economic and racial segregation, champion of high-quality, affordable housing, James Rouse's life has been defined by faith in the American spirit. He has made our cities and our neighborhoods as beautiful as the lives that pass through them. He has shown us that we can build communities worthy of the character and optimism of our people. I know that he has had a special impact on our Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, Henry Cisneros, and I can tell you that he has had a very special impact on my life. Every time I see James Rouse, I think, if every American developer had done what James Rouse has done with his life, we would have lower crime rates, fewer gangs, less drugs, our children would have a better future, our cities would be delightful places to live, we would not walk in fear, we would walk in pride down the streets of our cities, just as we still can in the small towns of America. James Rouse has changed this country, and if more will follow his lead, we can do the entire job we need to do in our cities. Mr. James Rouse. His name was William C. Velasquez, but everybody knew him as Willie. Willie was and is now a name synonymous with democracy in America. Through the organization he founded, the Southwest Voter Registration Education Project, he nearly doubled Hispanic voter registration and dramatically increased the number of Latino elected officials in this nation. His appeal to the Hispanic community was simple, passionate, and direct. Su voto es su voz. Your vote is your voice. The movement he began here at home went on to support democracy abroad in El Salvador, Nicaragua, and Mexico, and in South Africa. From the farm fields of California, where he organized workers with Cesar Chavez, to the halls of Harvard, where he taught politics, Willie Velasquez was driven by an unwavering belief that every American should have a role in our democracy and a share in the opportunities of our great nation. Willie Velasquez died too young. He was just 44 when he passed away in 1988, but in his vibrant life, he restored faith in our ideals and in ourselves. And no person in modern America who has run for public office, wherever Hispanic Americans live, has failed to feel the hand of Willie Velasquez. He made this a greater country, and we're honored that his wife is here with us today. It is not surprising that Lew Wasserman has devoted his life to helping others to see, for it was his vision that led him from the streets of Cleveland to the top of Hollywood, and his perspective that inspired him to give so much back to a nation that had given so much to him. Lew Wasserman helped to build MCA from a small booking agency into a vast multimedia company. His feat awakened the world to the infinite promise of the American entertainment industry. It also showed a new generation of American business leaders that a company's success can be measured by the depth of its values as well as by the size of its revenues. In honor of MCA's founder, the eye doctor Jules Stein, Lew Wasserman has made an astonishing contribution to treat and to cure blindness. He has devoted himself to strengthening the American community through his role as citizen advisor to almost half-century of presidents of both parties, and with his support for countless humanitarian efforts. Never for a moment has he forgotten his roots, the value of hard work, or the importance of giving people in far, far less fortunate conditions the chance to make something of their lives. The story of Lew Wasserman is the story of the American dream, not just for what he has achieved, but far more important, for what he has given back. I have met a lot of philanthropists and successful people in my life. I don't know that I ever met anybody that more consistently every day looked for another opportunity to do something for somebody else, to give somebody else the chance to enjoy the success that he had in life. I thank you, Lew Wasserman. Let me close before we hear from the official citation and present the medals by saying that I think that all the people who are here, were they to speak, would tell you that they did not come here alone. They were guided by parents and teachers, by neighbors and mentors. Many were inspired by other great Americans who themselves at some time in the past received this very medal. The miracle of American life is that this cycle can be repeated over and over again with each succeeding generation, and that with each succeeding generation we make freedom a little more real and full to all Americans. I ask all of you to think about that. You couldn't help feeling when you heard these stories that this is a very great country, and we do not have to give in to our lesser selves. We do not have to be divided. We do not have to achieve less than we can. If we will follow their examples, we will make sure that in the next century, this country will be all it was meant to be for all of our children. I'd like to now ask the military aide to read the citations as I present the medals of freedom.
The President of the United States of America awards the Presidential Medal of Freedom to Peggy Charon. Making it her life's work to put our children first, Peggy Charon has raised America's consciousness about our responsibilities to young people. As the mother of preschoolers, she recognized years ago the powerful influence of television and began her crusade to improve the nature of children's programming. Her creating leadership at Action for Children's Television led to the passage of Children's Television Act of 1990 and challenged the television industry to fulfill its responsibility to educate our children as well as entertain them. While many have decried the quality of television, Peggy Charon has done something about it, making a real and positive difference in the lives of young Americans. The President of the United States of America awards the Presidential Medal of Freedom to William Thaddeus Coleman, Jr. Holding fast to his conviction that equal access to the American dream is the right of all our citizens, William Coleman has endeavored throughout his life to close the gap between the ideals enshrined in our Constitution and the reality of our daily lives. He implemented some of our nation's first affirmative action programs and has worked tirelessly for their success. As clerk for Supreme Court Justice Felix Frankfurter, as a talented attorney, as Secretary of Transportation, and as chairman of the board of the NAACP Legal Defense and Educational Fund, William Coleman has inspired and enlightened us on our journey toward equality for all Americans. President of the United States of America awards the Presidential Medal of Freedom to Joan Gans Cooney. Recognizing that the care and support of children is our most sacred task, Joan Gans Cooney has worked to provide young people with the knowledge and moral guidance they need to make the most of their lives. In founding the Children's Television Workshop, she understood that the media could be a powerful tool for helping parents in the vital work of raising their children. The workshop's innovative programs, such as Sesame Street, have inspired a generation of children with a common love for learning, tolerance, and cooperation. The President of the United States of America awards the Presidential Medal of Freedom to John Hope Franklin. His extraordinary work in the field of American history and his studies of the South have earned John Hope Franklin the respect and admiration of people throughout the world. He has demonstrated that the diversity of our country enjoys is a source of enormous strength. Franklin treasures American history as he treasures the beautiful orchids he raises, and his genuine passion and commitment are reflected both in his writings and his devotion to the natural world. Following his maxim, look history straight in the face and call it like it is, he has helped to define who we are and where we have been, and he has encouraged each of us to look forward to where we are going. The President of the United States of America awards the Presidential Medal of Freedom to A. Leon Higginbotham, Jr. Knowing firsthand the pain of racial bigotry, A. Leon Higginbotham, Jr. entered the profession of law to protect and bring justice to our nation's disempowered. He moved steadily through the ranks of the judicial system, ultimately becoming Chief Judge of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Third Circuit and a leading intellectual voice on issues involving race and the law. Combining the mind of an impartial adjudicator and the heart of a passionate activist, Judge Higginbotham has proven to be one of our Constitution's greatest defenders and one of equality's staunchest allies. The President of the United States of America awards the Presidential Medal of Freedom to Frank M. Johnson, Jr. Martin Luther King, Jr., recognizing Frank Johnson's unflinching commitment to equality under law, once observed that Judge Johnson gave true meaning to the word justice, and indeed he has. Appointed America's youngest sitting U.S. District Judge in 1955, Johnson went on to shape American law during some of our nation's most turbulent times. Joining the majority in Browder versus Gale, he helped end the Jim Crow tradition that relegated black Americans to the back of the bus. Hastening the demise of segregation across the country, in the years since, he has consistently protected the rights of the unempowered, always working to ensure all have equal access to the American dream. Judge Frank Johnson is among our nation's greatest champions of freedom, and he has earned our lasting gratitude. Accepting for Mr. Johnson is John Byron Sandage. The President of the United States of America awards the Presidential Medal of Freedom to C. Everett Koop. C. Everett Koop always recognized that science must not be governed by politics, but rather by sober reasoning based on hard facts and research. As Surgeon General, he stayed true to his convictions, conscious of his responsibilities as the nation's chief health officer. He candidly addressed such controversial issues as age education, a ban on smoking, and efforts to reduce teen pregnancy. While he earned the ire of some, he won the gratitude of millions by helping to make their lives safer and healthier. A gifted surgeon, a compassionate spokesperson for the young, and an extraordinary public servant who insists on placing integrity above ideology, C. Everett Koop exemplifies what is best about the American character. The President of the United States of America awards the Presidential Medal of Freedom to Gaylord A. Nelson. Throughout an inspiring lifetime of public service, Gaylord Nelson has distinguished himself by using the power of government to fulfill one of humanity's solemn responsibilities, the protection of Earth's fragile environment. Having proudly served his home state of Wisconsin as a legislator and as governor, he brought his talents to the United States Senate in 1963, where he authored and championed a series of proposals to protect America's natural resources. His efforts to create Earth Day set our nation on a path of increasing concern for the environment, encouraging all Americans to take greater responsibility for the well-being of our planet. Gaylord Nelson's lifelong commitment has enabled millions to recognize and treasure nature's priceless beauty, preserving it for generations of Americans to come. The President of the United States of America awards the Presidential Medal of Freedom posthumously to Walter P. Reuther. Throughout the most productive and tumultuous years in the history of American labor and until his death in 1970, Walter Reuther strived timelessly to advance the needs of working men and women. He brought together workers in the automobile industry and spent much of his life mobilizing, energizing, and leading the United Automobile Workers, bringing to the union a powerful unity, a new effectiveness, and a strong social conscience. As a forceful advocate for fairness and dignity in the workplace, Reuther was a devoted friend of workers around the world and an ardent foe of corruption and racism. Our country is stronger and wiser because of his passionate and honest leadership. Accepting today for Mr. Reuther is Walter Reuther Dickmeyer. The President of the United States of America awards the Presidential Medal of Freedom to James W. Rouse. Guided by an abiding belief that cities should be among our proudest achievements, James Rouse has used his design and development skills to breathe new life into urban areas. Today, lively and innovative projects like Boston's Faneuil Hall Marketplace and Baltimore's Harbor Place, as well as the planned community of Columbia, Maryland, stand as monuments to Rouse's talent and vision. Advising several presidents on housing policies, he has worked in both the public and private sectors to revitalize our cities, strengthen local economies, and fundamentally improve the quality of life for citizens across America. The President of the United States of America awards the Presidential Medal of Freedom posthumously to William C. Velasquez. Willie Velasquez labored throughout his career to infuse American public life with the vibrant Hispanic heritage. With vision and the skills he developed as a member of Cesar Chavez's farm worker movement, Velasquez founded the Southwest Voter Registration Education Project in 1974. His untiring efforts nearly doubled Hispanic voter registration and dramatically increased the number of Latino elected officials in this country. Though cancer took him from us too soon, Willie Vasquez's legacy lives on in all who seek to make our democracy truly representative of America's diversity. Accepting from Mr. Velasquez is Jane Velasquez. the President of the United States of America awards the Presidential Medal of Freedom to Lou R. Wasserman. A figure of legendary strength and vision in Hollywood, Lou Wasserman has helped to make America the world's leader in the entertainment industry. With skill and determination, he was instrumental in turning a small booking agency into a multimedia empire, winning respect for his tenacity and devotion to hard work. On his steady rise to the top, he never forgot those in our country who still struggle. A generous friend to many humanitarian efforts, Wasserman has taken particular interest in assisting those who are blind and visually impaired, helping to preserve the precious gift of sight for countless Americans. His life of achievement and service reflects the best qualities of the American dream.
We are now going to hear again from the Ying Quartet, and for those of you who do not know their story, they are not only extraordinary musicians, but have devoted themselves to sharing their talents with people in Iowa and now Ohio so that classical music can spread throughout our entire country. At the conclusion of their playing, we will be in the Blue Room for a receiving line, and the state dining room will be open for reception. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.